This channel is made possible through the support of generous listeners just like you. If you would like to be a part of helping us bring our message of hope, peace, love, and spiritual truth to the world, please consider heading to experienceofthesoul.com/support, where you can join us as an ongoing patron or simply make a one-time gift. Blessings on the journey, dear friend.
Natural Awakenings Magazine and Zen Living Realty present The Authentic Spiritual Journey, a weekly show featuring real and practical spiritual conversations from diverse perspectives here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. Today, episode 95, Dreaming in the Time of Crisis, part 1. And now your host, Reverend Cynthia Alice Anderson.
Hello and welcome to the Authentic Spiritual Journey. My name is Cynthia Alice Anderson. I am the host and I'm here in my home studio with my producer.
Hello everybody, this is Dave Croft. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the Authentic Spiritual Journey. Today's episode, Dreaming in Times of Crisis, which is an interesting topic because just this morning Shannon said that she was having some crazy dreams and she doesn't really dream a ton, but man, so I know we're not talking about, dreams, but just dreaming in general amidst such challenging times across the world.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I will start out saying a word about that. But first, before I do, I want to just do a shout out to all those listeners who are around the world and joining us. And we really thank you for your feedback that the messages we're bringing are supporting you in this difficult time. And we want you to know that we're in this with you. We're holding the world in prayer every single day. And of course, individually, I'm working with people one-on-one and really trying to support people in doing their soul work. And so we applaud you for tuning in, for, doing the work of your soul in the midst of everything that's happening. And of course, what we're talking about, without saying it, we all know, which is the COVID-19 pandemic. Of course, that means it's around the world, touching all countries. And so we've never had such a time in my lifetime in the last 100 years.
Oh yeah, absolutely not. This is unprecedented.
Unprecedented. And so spiritually, that's a time that we pay attention. It's very important on the journey to pay attention when something is happening of this magnitude that's never happened before. And I want to really, really encourage you to stop and to take stock of what you are about and what's supposed to be happening in your life, because this is like the great cosmic reboot is exactly what's happening here. And by that, of course, I mean, if your computer doesn't work, what do?
You restart it. Yeah,
That's right.
It's the first thing. It's what I tell anybody that is having any problems. Just restart it. Your phone's being weird or whatever, just restart it. The computer's glitching out, the programs, just restart it. So I guess that's happening on a global scale.
Yes, exactly. That's happening on a global scale. And so when that happens, you have to wonder, why and what is my part in it and what am I to do next? And so today's show, Dreaming in Times of Crisis, is about just that. And Dave, I'm glad you mentioned dreams because I was having some dreams, and I know many of the people I work with were too, before this happened, about ways they needed to protect themselves. And I thought it was so interesting that, once this hit so big here, then all those dreams kind of came into focus. There was a real context for what was happening. It's like the people's souls knew that something big was coming, that self-protection was going to be needed. And this just reminds me that the soul always knows what's going to happen. The soul is connected to eternity. The soul is wisdom. The soul is guidance. The soul is, clear vision. So it's why we talk so much about contacting the soul. We talk so much about, reawakening consciousness to love, acceptance, and peace, because the soul knows what is next. So as a matter of fact, I even, my son and I even made a playlist about it before it ever happened. And then as things started progressing, then my son made his own playlist. his own playlist about it.
Like a Spotify playlist, or
Yes,
or
yes. I think I called it hazmat protection or something like that. And so as you mentioned, Shannon having a lot of dreams. Some of our dreams are not individual. Well, they are individual, but they're both, I should say, individual and collective. What this means is that we are a soul that is connected to the collective and that can, in fact, get messages, have intuitions, have guidance of what is coming for the collective. So it's why it helps and really behooves us to listen to our dream state, because our dreams are always telling us, virtually our dreams are telling us our past, present, and future, if you can believe that. So paying attention, listening to those dreams, tapping in with what might be happening, I think is really important at such a time.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's weird is I can't remember if, of course, we're not recording, the morning of April 20th, but just I really can't remember any dreams here lately beyond, just the normal, hey, I've got to go to the bathroom, and you wake up and you're like, oh, I got to go to the bathroom. Those types of dreams.
Thanks for sharing.
Well, you know those types of dreams I'm talking about.
Yes, I do. Well, the other thing that's really happening for people, Dave, is that a lot of people who are empaths, and what we mean by that is people that are really energy sensitive. Some people now call that HSPs, highly sensitive people. But people who are empaths, who are largely empathic to the general world or population, are really experiencing a lot of fitful dreaming, are really experiencing a lot of heaviness and even grief that they can't quite name.
Yeah.
And so I even saw a post recently on Facebook, and I don't remember who it was, so I don't want to even try to name it, but I've heard this from 8 or 9 people in the last 2 weeks, that the heaviness, the grief, they're having to rest more, they're having to really tap into spirit more, and in fact, having to unplug from so much of the news, because the news is just reporting the same thing over and over and over. So all that said, it's important to guard yourself, to be mindful of how much news you are taking in, because of the impact that advertising and messages, have on our psyche. And it's super important to be dialing into your own soul and what spirit would have you to do at this time. That's exactly what today is about. But I'm glad you mentioned the dreams.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people are dealing with that. If we were in church, I'd say, now raise your hand if that's happened to you in the last week.
You can't see me, but I'm raising my hand.
Yeah, exactly.
And I know Shannon's been having just very fitful night's sleep. I mean, it's been, and she has strange sleeping patterns anyway, but this, ever since everything kind of shook down, it's been significantly impacted.
Yes, exactly. And that is very, very common right now. Shannon is very sensitive. She's very empathic. She's very spiritual. She's supporting a lot of people as well, both in her business and personally, I'm sure. Anybody who works in a church right now is supporting their own growth in a special way, supporting the greater church body in a special way, and then, like I say, even the community at large. Because what we realize is the interconnectedness of our path with the greater community. In Orlando, I think that was really brought home after the Pulse shooting, that people really realized how connected we were, as a community. And I think now in the pandemic, it's just happening on a larger, grander scale, that, oh my goodness, we are all connected. And in this, it happens to be a time of crisis. But the truth is, we're all connected always. in everything,
Yeah,
every action.
because
Yeah.
the pandemic cuts across demographics, it cuts across geography. It's easy to kind of say, hey, this happened in Orlando, or because it's a metropolitan, or maybe
Yeah.
even sadly, this happened to the gay community, or this happened to the Latino community. It's really easy, if you're not in that people group, to kind of put it in a box and it doesn't affect you, which I think we were all in. If I know I was last year, at the end of last year, when we were seeing reports out of China, and we were like, okay, and even January, but once it starts popping in on in Seattle or in Washington, and then now it starts spreading across. Now you can't just put it in its own little box and
Correct.
say that this is somebody. It's not just happening in New York anymore. It's everywhere, across every age group, across every demographic.
I totally agree. Yeah, I totally agree. And for the first time, I've seen, major Hollywood celebrities going live on Facebook from their homes, just saying, "Hey, man, we're all in this together." And even though they're messages of support, what I know, because I know souls, is they need it as much as everybody they're saying it to.
Right.
So we're all in this together, friends. There's no one that has not been touched by this in some way.
Speaking
Go ahead.
of Hollywood people and stars and celebrities, I was watching a Colbert video, and it's he's quarantined in his house and it's like his kids and his dog, and I'm like, wow, he's just like in a spare bedroom. His studio, quote unquote, is a little spare bedroom, and look, he's got IKEA furniture, and it's kind of like normalizing that. I think kind of pulling back the curtain behind some of the polish that it's easy to assume. It's easy to assume that a person like Stephen Colbert lives in a palatial mansion, or he has all these servants and everything, but he's just a dude living in a house with his family.
Well, the fact is, Dave, your studio is nicer than Stephen Colbert's.
Me and Shannon had that discussion. We were like, he's like, just like, that's a contractor, because they showed like a doorknob or something in the background. I'm like, that's just like a standard contractor's doorknob. And how do actors not have studio space set aside, in their house, like the way that musicians do have music
Right.
space? Anyway, that's.
Oh no, it's funny. Well, it is. It kind of has brought everybody to the same level, and we do put people on pedestals. We assume they're having some different life experience, but the truth is, we're all in this together. And it's what I always say: we are all souls.
Yeah, that's right.
We are all souls on the journey, and this is a time where we know that it's a time to be very human and also very spiritual.
Yeah.
The title for today's show is "Dreaming in Times of Crisis," and in that short phrase exists the two polarities, because yes, there is crisis, and it could have even hit our very own families, and yes, there is the soul and the ability to dream. So I'm slowing this down to allow you to have that sink in. Dreaming in times of crisis. The crisis, of course, is very real, and it is hitting people's fear, people's humanity. It's providing tremendous health challenge, obviously, for people around the world. And again, in our own families and church community. But is it possible to contact the soul and even, in fact, dream about what's possible and what's next? And my assertion is that not only is it possible, but that's what this time is for. This time is a time of deep, deep soul work. It's a time of going inward. It's a time of moving into new possibility for what's next. Now, the very typical response in this time of crisis is to be frantic or in full-blown terror or hysteria. Now, in terror or hysteria, you cannot dream of what's possible and what's next. And again, I want to mention that to really move into dreaming in a way that's meaningful, you're going to have to unplug from all the outer expressions, including video games, including television, including Netflix, including the news, and you're just going to have to be very, very quiet. It's going to require you to go outside, to connect with nature, to listen when it rains rather than just plugging into something, to take deep breaths, to pray, to meditate. So I'll say more about each of those things, but as a way of introduction, dreaming in times of crisis is not only possible, it's what I believe we're called to do. The reason is everything has stopped. So, and I said, and Dave, I don't know if you remember this, but there were many Sunday services over the last several months where I said, does anybody look at the world right now and say, hey, everything is going great? Right, you're laughing because you know the answer.
Right, nobody's looking at the world and says, hey, I'm okay with all of this.
Yeah, exactly. And the interesting thing, and I have a brother who's very like almost a polar opposite of me in terms of our political leanings. But I mean, I love him dearly, and he's a very handsome, talented, beautiful soul. And if I asked him, are you happy with the way things are? He would say, absolutely not. And if I asked, yourself, myself, if I asked either one of us, gee, are you happy with the way things have been going? I mean, none of us would say yes. So, even though we might be in the world in different places, say about social issues even, or political issues even, we wouldn't still be happy with what's happening. The infighting, as you were saying earlier, Dave, each group vying for more power, getting louder and louder. Well, finally, the world said, enough, stop. And, the animal world, I believe, said, we can't handle this noise anymore. We're shutting it down. So it wasn't working as it was, which means something new is supposed to come forth. How is something new going to come forth if we're not dreaming? I want to really say a lot about this. We are in the advanced course right now of Dream Big, Live Big that's happening on Wednesday evenings. And I want to take this pause, too, to mention that I was just looking, if you're watching the video, I was just looking over at a list I've made. I'm doing a new course starting in May called Spiritual Prosperity. I'm making it really, really inexpensive so that as many people as possible can join. The only reason I have to charge something is just because there should be always an exchange, and also I have to pay for the both the help and the materials and the systems that can provide the class. But I want you to be aware that's coming. For any of us trying to move into new ideas and to new incomes and to new jobs, this course is going to really, really support you. And like I said, I'm making it very, very affordable. So dreaming in times of crisis, I'm going to keep saying that because it is what we are to be doing right now, allowing ourselves to dream.
Now, do you mean like as far as like career type things or opportunities, or?
I mean, yes and yes. Because it's everything.
Because I know, like during this time, I know speaking for Shannon, she's birthed a whole new business during this time, and it's forced me to think about new and creative ways to like what we're doing right now. You're in your studio or your place. I'm in my studio and working on bettering the sound and all of that. And so it's forcing me to think about new solutions. And but I'm not sure that would have happened if I hadn't been kind of pushed into this.
Well, I agree, and Frank, I love coming to your house, but it saved me at least an hour commute time to stay at home, which again, I always love coming to your house and to the studio, but it's freed up time because we're doing things differently, right?
Right.
Yeah, exactly. I think this time has forced me as well. This course, Spiritual Prosperity, would have not come forward without this need. And I have been meditating, journaling, releasing on pretty much every level. And I just got this a 7-point course. I'm going to record videos this week for it to really support and inspire people as we're marching forward in this, because we know this is not just a 30-day situation that we find ourselves in. So, yeah, it's on a career level, it's on a relationship level that I'm talking about dreaming. It's on a spiritual level, and what is most important in the work that I'm speaking of doing is to begin with the spiritual, and then the spiritual piece, the soul piece, will start guiding the other areas. So I'm going to talk, next half, I'm going to talk a little bit more about, about some methods that you might want to employ to do this. But I want to really hone in on this, friends, that dreaming in times of crisis, in other words, dreaming in the time we find ourselves, is not only possible, it is necessary so that we can move forward, when this is finally over, that we will emerge new people. When this is over, we will emerge, with new awareness. We will emerge with new career steps. We will emerge with new income levels. And it's very, very possible to prosper even during this time. So I want to encourage all of us to know that God knows what we need. I want to encourage all of us to know that this situation does not define who we are. So there's a lot more coming forward for you. There's a lot more that's possible for you. So we'll talk more about that as we come back right after these brief messages.
We'll return to the program in just a few moments, but first, we wanted to give a special word of thanks to our podcast partner, Natural Awakenings Magazine of Central Florida, Greater Orlando. Each month, Natural Awakenings magazines across the country take a practical look at the latest natural approaches to nutrition, fitness, creative expression, personal growth, and sustainable living. Natural Awakenings magazine is a free publication and is available in selected stores, health and education centers, healing centers, public libraries, and wherever free publications are located. You could learn more, including advertising opportunities for your business, by calling 407-628-0705. We'd also like to extend our special thanks to Zen Living Realty. Zen Living Realty's mission is to mindfully serve, connect, and positively impact their customers, partners, and community through their Zen approach to real estate. Their vision is to be the most trusted real estate brokerage in the Central Florida area. You can reach Zen Living Realty at zenlivingrealty.com or call 407-800-2717. And now we return you to this week's episode of The Authentic Spiritual Journey with your host, Reverend Cynthia Alice Anderson.
Hello and welcome back. Our show is Dreaming in Times of Crisis. I want to assure you, friends, that we will give you resources to support you in this. And I'm even going to record a special meditation that will support you. It'll come out on Friday. I want to talk a little bit more about dreaming in times of crisis. And before I move on, I just want to continue to thank our sponsors who support this show no matter what's going on, are still supporting our show. And that means the world to us because, frankly, it keeps us on the air. It keeps us paying our bills. As we say, keeps the AC on in Florida. And we're very happy for your love and your support, especially during this time.
Yeah, our sponsors and our patrons who have been faithful through all of this. Thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you. So in this time of a crisis, I'm going to just, if we were in a one-on-one, I'm speaking not to Dave, but to the collective that's listening. If we were in a one-on-one, I'd put on my teacher voice right now and say, you have to make time every day to ground yourself in spirit right now more than ever. You have to. I don't care whatever else you think you have to do. I don't care how many kids you've got home. I don't care how many animals you've got to look after. I don't care if you're alone or there's 20 people in the house. You have to find a way to ground into God right now. Because if you don't, you're going to go down this dark hole that so many people are in of worry and fear and trauma drama. And there's enough real grief, as I mentioned, there's enough pain, there's enough suffering already without people who don't need to be there going there, right? So I'm saying all of this, friends, out of the best interest of our souls. Find a way every single day, whether it's morning, noon, or night, or all three, to connect and ground into spirit. I'm going to give you a couple of surefire ways to do that. One is to breathe. One is to breathe. And you say, well, I'm breathing now. Yeah. Most of us grew up, and I've mentioned this before, but it's really important to mention again. Most of us grew up in homes where we kind of walked on eggshells. You know, we didn't know when the other shoe was going to drop. We were in a large amount of the time in some state of heightened either anxiety or fear simply because of what was happening in the home. So I want to encourage you to ground yourself by breathing. You learn what we all learn to do is fear breathing, which happens in the upper chest area and not down more, not only in the lower aspects of your body. And when you really learn to breathe properly, you're really breathing into that first, second chakra area even. So I want to encourage you to breathe. Take time to breathe. The breath is the way through. What begins to happen when you give yourself permission to breathe deeply, in other words, to breathe past the fear breathing, is to allow you to feel. So as you begin to breathe, you will begin to feel. If you have stuffed your feelings with alcohol, with drugs, with food, with addiction of any kind, gambling, debt, whatever your addiction may be, one of the reasons you've chosen to use is because that's how you dealt with whatever was hard, whatever feelings, were coming up, or whatever life experience was too difficult to handle. And I know as well as the next person that addiction arises out of a need to feel, to escape emotional pain. That said, this fear breathing, this lack of connecting with the breath, when in the short term we feel like it saves us, ultimately it robs us of our life energy because we're not able to feel. As a matter of fact, we're going to have a guest coming up, a dear friend who is an incredible, who's been an incredible influence on my life. And she's written a book. We're going to bring her on. And she's the one who taught me also about the feeling check-in. But, to even know that you have feelings for some of us is brand new. So this seems simple that I'm saying, give yourself time to breathe. Breathe and ground into spirit. Breathe, allow yourself to feel. But for some of us, this is a major spiritual step. When you have held in your childhood experience, when you have held in the fears, the anxieties, the worries, and when you breathe, it's like the floodgates open. So when you begin to breathe deeply, in the beginning, it can be scary. In the beginning, it can be, it can make you feel like you don't know where the ground is at first, but it's only because you're feeling feelings. You haven't allowed yourself to feel for a very long time. When you can continue to breathe, even though you have feelings, then something begins to shift. So here's how I'm meaning it might look. If you're used to breathing, staying up in the chest, and you begin to breathe deeply, all of a sudden tears come and you get scared and you think, I'm going to start crying and never stop. And this is just the ego again, sabotaging and robbing you of your process. But if you allow the tears to come, what you'll find is that you don't cry forever. Eventually, you run out of tears and you keep breathing. So even though the fear comes, you keep breathing. Even though you get a little anxious, you keep breathing. Even though you sob, you keep breathing. You blow your nose, you keep breathing. You get a drink of water, you keep breathing. And in the beginning, the truth is, it can be difficult to learn to reteach your body to breathe again. And the way you can do it is to hold one hand on your chest, in this upper part of your body where most of us hold our breath, and then put your other hand down in your gut, down on your lower stomach, kind of around your belly button. And as you breathe, really the only one that should move is your hand that's on your belly button, not the hand that's on your chest. So this is how to differentiate the kind of breathing you're doing. If you look at a baby breathe, they always breathe with their stomach. This is the way a baby breathes, the way I'm teaching you.
I've never noticed that.
Oh, yeah. Babies always have these deep, big belly breaths. Now, too, everybody's so busy holding in their guts because everybody wants good abs that nobody's letting themselves breathe. So one of the ways to connect with the lower breath is to just consciously do it. There's even a method called 3-part breathing where you open your gut, and then your kind of middle heart area, and then you feel your chest kind of open. But in the beginning, it's important for you to really just notice where you're breathing from. And at the very, very beginning, when you're first beginning this process, you may need to only do it for 4 or 5 breaths because it might feel strange. You might feel like, I don't feel like I can breathe. Just take a break and try to do 6 breaths tomorrow. I'm in a process right now of doing like 50 very long, deep breaths, which can take 30 minutes when you're doing really, really long, deep breaths. And I think I mentioned this one time that I was at a doctor. This is a few months ago now. I was at a doctor and they said, take a deep breath. And I did one of my long breaths and they were like, no, breathe out. You have to breathe out. I was like, oh, yeah, I forgot. I don't breathe like normal people anymore. So breathing is a wonderful way to connect with spirit. In the scriptures, in the book of Genesis, it says, God breathed into man's nostrils the breath of life. So this is not, I don't believe literal, but it's an idea that breath is life. Breath is life. So I want to encourage you to breathe. It will also slow you down. It will also, remember, allow you to feel. As you begin to breathe more deeply and you start to have feelings you never felt before, don't go back to the old ways of numbing out, of using, etc. I want to make sure you are really grounding in with spirit. I want to make sure feelings are going to come up, and that is a part of the curriculum. That is part of your soul evolving. Feelings coming up is part of your soul growing. So be assured that as you start breathing deeply, things will shift. That's what they're supposed to do. But in the short term, it feels hard. But even just after a few days of doing it, you'll start to feel a lot better. You'll start to feel more grounded. You will feel you'll feel yourself be less reactive. So breathing is the key. Right now, in my studio, I'm taking a deep breath, and I invite you to do that with me wherever you are. The breath is a way to connect with God. It's a way to ground yourself in spirit. Simply breathing. What I love about this is it doesn't cost any money. It's free. It's what you were meant to do. And it's the most grounding thing you can do. Breathe. Remember to focus as you breathe on the breath being in the lower abdomen rather than the chest so that you're getting the most benefits. Now, you might be saying, I thought this was about dreaming in times of crisis. It is. You can't dream if your mind is everywhere, if you're in this panic state all the time. Breathing allows you to center, to get still with spirit so that you know what's yours to do next. The other piece I want to mention, and this is the meditation I'm going to do for Friday's meditation on Experience to the Soul podcast channel, which is I'm going to do Jane Hart's 7 steps of release. And the release will be taking yourself up the 7 steps. Why do we do this? Well, the 7 steps, evidently this is going to be a 2-part series, Dave.
Okay.
The 7 steps are very important in releasing the old view you have of yourself. So you're going to take yourself up the 7 steps. Now, as I've talked about it in the past, very often we talk about the 7 steps as releasing someone who's done you harm, right? That it's about forgiveness. It's about releasing toxic energy we have against another. But the 7 steps, more personalized, are extremely powerful because it takes you through a series of 7 aspects of a relationship. And believe it or not, the one relationship that impacts everything else is your relationship with yourself. And of course, with God, that goes without saying. But the way you view yourself affects every other relationship. That being said, it's important to release the old ideas of what you have about yourself so that the new ideas can come forward. If you are breathing, if you are feeling, and then you want to dream, you're going to find yourself blocked because you're still dreaming from the old consciousness. You're still dreaming from the old aspect of who you were. You're still dreaming from the past. You're still dreaming from your wounds. The 7-step of release for your mind, body, and soul, because you cover it all in the journaling pieces, that is what is going to move your soul forward in a tremendous, tremendous way. The 7 steps. So, and the process of the 7 steps takes several. Well, usually, especially if you're taking yourself up the steps, it's going to take a while to do that. What I mean is, you can't sit down in 10 minutes and take yourself up the 7 steps and have a whole new you. You're going to need to set aside time each day, as I mentioned. After you do your breathing, you're going to journal one of the steps. And I'll give you some examples. The first step is, thank you, God. And so you just give thanks for, this life that you have. The second step is good times. You start remembering, old, good times in your life. Maybe look at photo albums, pull out some old pictures, really allow yourself to get in touch with some of those times. It could be weddings, birthdays, anniversaries, time with your kids, whatever those good times are. So you see the first 2 steps, you can see how that could not be rushed, nor would you want to rush it. The third step is hopes and dreams. It's what you hoped was possible, what you hoped you would accomplish, what you still are dreaming about for the future. The fourth step is about disappointments and difficulties. What were those blocks? What were the things you're trying to bring forward and couldn't? What were the ways that, there was a disconnect? And you journal all that. And then the fifth step is forgiveness. And in this step, you even journal why you would not want to forgive, so that you give your ego, you give your ego plenty of time and give your ego its day to just say why it doesn't want to forgive, because the ego never wants to forgive. The ego always wants to be right. The ego always wants to hold on. And the sixth step is release, and the seventh is completion, where you really totally surrender to God. And then in the meditation piece, I'm giving you this much because I'm trying to help prepare your soul for this. The meditation then is the release of all the journaling work. So you have to journal it first, write it down. It's so important to write it down so that you move the energy out of your body. It's why I always encourage people to journal with a real pen and a piece of paper, or pencil and a piece of paper, so that it helps move the energy out of your body. You release it onto the page. And sometimes, I've noticed for myself, if I'm journaling the disappointments and difficulties, it's intense. Sometimes I almost go through the page, if I'm being totally honest. So I want you to allow yourself this time to journal. In the breathing, if you're very new to the breathing and you start it today, like let's say you say, oh my gosh, I need to do this breathing thing. I just want you, after you do your breathing, journal how you feel, so that you start to get used to what it's like to have feelings. And remember, as you're breathing and the feelings come up, it doesn't mean you act on the feelings just because you have them. It means you see what they are and you see what the feelings have to teach you. That's very, very important for the processes that I'm going to be giving you coming up. So first we breathe. You write down the feelings. And then when you feel ready, you start the 7-step work. The 7 steps, we will put them in the show notes. So if you decide to start journaling early, you can. And then again on Friday, I'll be bringing that to you. And I think definitely next Monday, we're going to do a little bit more on dreaming in times of crisis. Friends, what we talked about today is so important for your soul's health. Our culture as a whole is so stuck in bad news and in the mind that it has completely forgotten the soul. And one of the reasons for this great cosmic reboot we're in is because the way we were doing things no longer works. So rather than during this time waiting for everything to return to normal, which it never will be like it was, we want to spend time dreaming what's possible. To do that well, we have to connect in with spirit through a time every day of spiritual connection. And number one to that is breathing. Breathing, feeling the feelings, and then dreaming will come next. Don't worry. So we do support you on your spiritual journey. I hope today really gave you some good places to start with your practice or deepen. If you are already doing some breathing, if you're taking the class and we do our reverse nostril breathing every day for about 7 or 8 minutes, I'm going to encourage you to then move into this deeper breathing that I've described today, where you can do a certain number. And it's helped me to have a certain number to go for, because sometimes I do it with a song, sometimes just in silence. But if I have a number, like if I'm going to do 10 really deep breaths or 25 really deep breaths or 50 really deep breaths, it helps give me a direction and a beginning and end. And it helps my mind not wander, because I'm counting each breath and really focused on the breath going in and coming out again. So if you're already doing the breathing we do in class, add this to your practice. And we'll be talking about this too, probably this week in the class as well. So we do thank you for joining us today. We want to give you spiritual resources, and we'll be giving you Jane Elizabeth Hart's 7 steps. I think she calls it 7 steps to successful life transitions. But somehow in my mind, I've shortened it to 7 steps of release. And we're going to encourage you to take yourself of the 7 steps so that the new version of you, in other words, the holy version of you, the soul of you, can come forward. So thank you for joining us today, dear friends. As always, we love you. We bless you. We're lifting you up. We're holding you in prayer, as always, for God's highest and best in your life. Many blessings.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Authentic Spiritual Journey presented by Natural Awakenings Magazine and Zen Living Realty. The Experience of the Soul podcast channel is also made possible through the continued support of our angel patrons, Dove Borland, Peter Gibson, Paul Caswell, Arlene Meyer, Kathy and Terry, Marcia Mott, Nora Miles, Diana Cox, Leslie Williams, Susanna Garcia, Shayla Mount, Dorothy Moore, Aggie Payton, Taryn Tucker, and Anna Evans. The Authentic Spiritual Journey is copyright 2020 Cynthia Alice Anderson, all rights reserved. Our theme music is composed by Dave Croft and used with permission from RR Hot Publishing. The Experience of the Soul podcast channel is a production of 818 Studios.